Thanks for joining me today. My name is Ben Murray, and thanks again for joining. And this is part of my no-fluff webinar series where it's educational, educating the SaaS community to pay it forward. All the time here is donated. There's no sales messages, just trying to help the SaaS community. And lately, getting a ton of questions from founders, executives about designing sales comp plans, which we know is so important as we move from founder-led sales to a sales-led motion or inbound, whatever it might be. We need sales compensation plans. So important. So getting that question a lot. So I reached out to Ryan and Graham to educate us, and they said, yep, happy to do it. So they're on the line today, and they'll do an intro here shortly. And so if we have not met yet, SaaS CFO by trade, now fractional CFO, coach, instructor, of course, came up through the ranks of finance and accounting in the airline and software industries, and then been blogging at my SaaS CFO site for 7+ years, have an academy, have a news site. So really live and breathe B2B SaaS metrics finance today. And that's my email right here. If you need to get a hold of me, Ben at saascfo.com. So again, thanks for joining. So a little bit of housekeeping. This is a live Zoom. So you can throw questions in the chat. You can unmute and ask questions. We want to make this very interactive. I guarantee I'm going to have questions today. So feel free. We'll pause at certain points, ask questions, and then we'll open it up to Q&A at the end because there are a lot of data points. I got a preview of the slides, a lot of great stuff in there. So, but again, live Zoom, ask questions in the chat. I'll monitor that. And also, you can also unmute and we'll have a Q&A session at the end. So today, building a scalable sales comp plan. I've seen a ton of different sales comp plans. I've inherited sales comp plans where it's like, oh my gosh, that's a really rich plan. How do we make this more, aligned to corporate objectives? So things can go really right or really wrong with sales comp plans. So I've got Ryan and Graham on the webinar today to educate us about sales comp plans from QuotaPath. And so with that, I'm going to stop sharing. You guys can bring up your slides. And if you guys want to do some quick intros, then we'll dive right in.
Perfect. Dran, do you want to pull up the slides?
Absolutely. Do that. Wonderful.
First and foremost, thank you everyone for joining. And Ben, thank you for having us. It's been a fun set of webinars working together and really excited for more in the future. So we'll do a quick introduction first, introduce ourselves, and then introduce QuotaPath. So I'll start. Hi, everyone. My name is Ryan Milligan. I lead the revenue operations and sales teams here at QuotaPath. Data practitioner by trade, so big SQL kind of analytic background before transitioning into performance marketing and then revenue operations, and then taking on our sales team in Q4 of last year, which was very fun and a great challenge. So I've done probably a couple hundred compensation plan consultation at this point. So if at any point after the call you want some advice on a comp plan, we'll drop our kind of Calendly links. Graham and I both will to grab time to talk more about that as well. But Graham, I'll let you intro yourself as well, and then I'll give a little bit of an intro of QuotaPath too.
Wonderful. Yeah, Graham Collins, head of partnerships at QuotaPath. I've held just about every role at QuotaPath over the years. I ran our sales team until Ryan was suckered into taking it over last year. And that's my background is in sales and sales leadership. Currently overseeing partnerships at QuotaPath, but all the while I have focused as well on comp plan consults. So I've done I guess between Ryan and I, we've done over 700 of those comp plan consults. And so, yeah, happy to drop a Calendly. I also bought meetwithgraham.com, and that has my Calendly on it, which is pro move. Love that move.
Perfect domain.
Yeah, exactly. And then this is not a sales pitch, but this is what Ryan and I have been up to recently. And so this is, if we seem a little distracted, this is kind of a welcome relief for us. But Ryan, you want to talk a little bit about this?
Yeah, let me first give the overview of what QuotaPath is and what we do. The mission of QuotaPath is to automate the process of calculating and paying commissions. And so we work across the entire domain of people who are involved in commissions, from the individual sales rep to the sales leader to the ops leader and finance leader. And really our goal is to make the process of calculating and paying commissions as easy as possible. So syncing directly into your CRM or source of truth, building out that logic that a lot of the finance leaders in the room lock themselves in the room on a Friday, first week of the quarter, and calculate commission. I did that a lot in past roles. So really trying to automate that process, give your sales teams and your reps visibility into their earnings so that they can flag discrepancies. You have to go back and forth with those for a quarter, and then just simplifying the process of actually paying the team. So if at any point you want comp plan help of any kind, Graham and I are always here to help. This is not a pitch for QuotaPath, we promise, but more specifically, if that's a problem you're facing, we talk about it. And really today, we've launched a couple of big features that have solidified our product as being the most adaptable in the market, really focused on the kind of complexities of comp that I'm sure many of you deal with on a day-to-day basis. So quotas that roll up from individual reps to a team manager, how do you do that now? How do you handle reps swapping teams mid-period? How do you do quota relief if an SDR gets promoted to an AE mid-quarter? How do you have 4 or 5 people approve a compensation plan structure? So we're trying to really build a lot of features for what I call the mid-market admin and specifically the finance admin to make her even happier in our product. It's been a fun launch for us.
Thanks, Ryan. And that also kind of gives you the credibility of, why we're qualified to talk about this stuff is that we see comp plans all day, every day, the good, the bad, the ugly. And one of the things as well is that we did a survey, a study late last year from about 450 finance, RevOps, and sales leaders, asking them a ton of questions. This is just one of those. What is the biggest challenge that you face during sales compensation plan design? The whole report is available if you click on that little QR code. I'm glad I double checked the QR code because it was not working up until about 5 minutes ago. So that QR code now does work, and it does bring you right to the report. So you can download that directly there. So what we're talking about today is sales compensation planning. I really like this chart. This shows you how on the bottom there is how much you know about comp plans. And if you don't know a ton about comp plans, you probably think that building comp plans is easy. Then the more you learn about it, you realize it's actually very complex, and you work your way up the hill. Hopefully we don't have anybody at the very top of the hill here. Although if you are at the very top, I suppose this session might get you on the other side of it, ideally. So our goal is to get you on the other side there into the high comp plan knowledge, realizing that building comp plans is actually relatively straightforward. And it's straightforward because really it's a rule of threes. There are 3 things that you need to answer when building a compensation plan. And that's going to be how much. So what is the on-target earnings as well as the pay mix? For what? What are the quotas? And how? What are the commissions and bonuses associated with that compensation plan? So let's take a deep dive into each of those. So we have how much. How much is broken down into 2 different questions. So that's going to be what is the on-target earnings? So on-target earnings is going to be however much someone can earn if they hit exactly 100% of all of their targets. Pay mix, which is what percent of that on-target earnings is base versus what percent is variable. And we have bigger versions.
I will say, Graham, one interesting thing is I'll play consults in the past week or two. A number of people have not had this on-target earnings number in mind. They have, hey, my reps earn 100K in base salary and then 3% of every deal they close. What's interesting is, finance team in the room, like you have to have some level of predictability of, okay, how much do I expect this person to close on that 3% to then model out the comp performance overall? And so it's a good question to ask like fellow revenue leaders or your CROs, like what is that on-target earning, which is, that base plus variable, that if a team member does their job perfectly well, how much should they expect to take home? And it's, you'll be a little befuddled, I think, for the number of people who don't have this number like top of hand for their AEs, SAEs, or that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And we'll share this data.
Yeah, we'll share the deck. And Ryan, Peter asked a great question. OT includes base salary, which it does. And yeah, we have to start with the foundation here first, that we actually define on-target earnings correctly.
Yeah. Yeah. Because a lot of times people will say, oh, the on-target earnings is, $100,000. And we base that on reps hitting 80% of their target. Like that's just simply not what an on-target earnings is. An on-target earnings is by definition on target. If you have hit all of your targets, then you would earn your on-target earnings.
Oh, perfect.
So then we get into the for what, which is what are the applicable quotas and or targets. So we'll talk a little bit more about this, but this is broken down into 2 questions as well. What is the quota amount? And what is the quota frequency? Meaning how often does that quota attainment reset? So monthly, quarterly, and annual are the most common there. And we'll talk a little bit about why you might do each of those. And then finally, the how. This is maybe the most fun part for me, which is what are the different commissions and bonuses that you want to pay your reps? This is where I enter the pizza topping rule, which is that If you add any more than 3 components, then it gets it's too much. Just like if you have a pizza that has all these random toppings on it, it's untenable and you can't taste all the different toppings. And so you want to make sure that you're keeping it in that 2 to 4 range. And just to quickly define commission versus bonus. So commission being a percentage of a currency value that's paid out. That can either be a flat single percentage or a multiple rate. And a bonus is a set amount of money earned for doing a specific thing, which sounds like a very broad definition, and it is.
One thing I'll add here that I find to be super important as you think about the how is really, I think, when I get designing comp plans and initially I'm in Excel and I'm like, okay, here are all the people and here's what's going to happen. You kind of lose the forest for the trees in terms of like what actually a comp plan is. And really what a comp plan is motivating somebody, paying somebody money for doing something that's great for your business is the truth of it, right? If you, the reason you have a comp plan, one is, to hire new business reps or account managers, I have to have a very good comp plan. But you could technically just pay everybody a base salary if you wanted to. The reason you don't, and the reason you have a comp plan is one, because people in go-to-market roles are very competitive and want to win and want to accelerate their earnings. But two is because you're trying to motivate a human to do something that is really good for your business. And so what I recommend after this is if you have a comp plan in place, go back to that comp plan and ask the seller who's on it, like, what does great look like from you in this comp plan? And if they can't super clearly articulate that to you, you've made a comp plan that's too confusing and not motivating in the way that a seller needs to be motivated. So that's the question I ask our team all the time. And one of my first questions on comp plan, like, what separates a great rep from a good rep? And then are you aligning that greatness to earning a lot more money?
I think that's a really good way of thinking about it, Ryan. And one of the things that I would caution specifically this group about when I say that is that I tend to see this happen more often in finance than it does in, when RevOps or when sales leadership builds the comp plan, is that they try to overcorrect and try to control everything via the sales compensation, the compensation plan. What I mean by that is I've seen plans where it's like, we want somebody to do monthly billing term, annual billing terms instead of monthly, and multi-year contracts instead of 1 year, and this product over that product. And what can end up happening if you have this 50-part comp plan? I had a comp plan the other day that was 37 pages long. Unbelievable. And so you have this 50-part comp plan, and again, reps lose the forest through the trees. They go, okay, well, if I close the deal this way or that way, and then what they end up doing is just closing whatever they can. And so there are certain things that can be controlled and should be controlled via sales compensation planning, and some things that can be controlled via coaching and rules and regulations that you set up.
And Fraser, your question on ROI for sales reps, the way that you can think about this, there's a couple ways, and we have some calculators that we can share. One is really around like kind of quota to OTE ratios based on the stage of your business. So naturally, as your business evolves and your recurring revenue grows, you have more resources surrounding a team member. And so they are going to have a higher quota relative to their on-target earnings because they're just lifted by demand of the market and awareness of your product and what have you. So that typically grows from like 3x quota to OT ratio up to 5-6x, depending kind of on your scale. So that's one mathematical check I keep in my back pocket. And then the other one truly is your sales to earnings ratios. So anywhere between like 2 to 3 to 4x is like something you think about as it is a kind of that sales to earnings ratio where you want to track. And the thing to really keep in mind there is what happens if a rep hits 10% attainment? And what does that mean for your cost? Because they haven't brought a ton of revenue in for your business, but you've paid them full base plus their commissions on those 10% dollars. And that's where your sales to earnings ratios can get out of whack from where you don't.
And Ryan, can we pause there for a second? And guys, actually, these are just the teaser slides. We have a bunch more slides coming up. So I think we're going to definitely fill the hour here. But so we have the ROI of, what they're achieving to their OTE, but how does the sales to earnings, is that the same? Is that a point in time? How does that sales to earnings differ?
So quota to FTE is your target, right? On target earning.
And all of your reps are hitting exactly 100% of their quota, right? That's how it works.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that is your on target earning, your quota for the team member divided by their on target earning. That's kind of like start of the year.
Yep.
What you're then going to look at is how are your reps actually performing, and what is the cost to your business if a rep hits super low attainment. So, or people have wild accelerators and your rep hits way above attainment. And so you're always wanting to track the measure of rep efficiency is that actual sale divided by their earnings base plus variable, and navigate that, like watch that throughout the year. Honestly, I share my reps, their sales to earnings ratios. And I'm like, look, because all of my reps are on the same comp plan. So like, I'm like, you're in a way better or worse sales to earnings than a more junior member. And a lot of times you find that your junior team members are actually your most efficient, which is a really interesting thing.
So that makes a ton of sense. So is that popular board slide, at least
Yeah.
in some of the boards I've been in where, it's, a listing of every single rep, what they've earned to date, what they've achieved to date. So not just the theoretical ROI, but actually how are they performing versus what they're earning versus what they're selling.
Because you get blinded by your senior reps who are closing enterprise grade logos for your business, but they actually may be markedly less efficient for you. And a really junior rep who's just closing 30 deals a quarter and just, cruising in low cost.
Okay, perfect. Thanks.
And also, it's also interesting to note that 46% of organizations have a different commission rate if you sell a multiple year deal. And so 2 reps may be selling the same ARR, but one rep is drastically out earning that other rep. And because they're selling all 3-year deals, whereas rep A is only selling 1-year deals. And so it is an interesting metric to look at, is that sales to earnings ratio.
Yeah, perfect.
Awesome. So now for a deep dive, we wanted to go through the actual example of building a compensation plan for an account executive. For those of you who aren't in the know, account executive is an industry term meaning like a new biz sales rep. So somebody who is responsible for bringing new business into an organization. Generally, it's a SaaS centric term, and I assume most of this audience is in SaaS. So let's take a quick look at how much. So on target earnings, from a mathematical standpoint, it doesn't really matter what the on target earnings is that you assign to somebody. And what I mean by that is, a lot of times you'll likely have different bands. You'll have a junior AE and an AE1 and an AE2 and a senior AE, and all of those may have slightly different on target earnings. What is important to us is that is consistent across roles, having the consistent title, have a consistent on target earnings, and you're using the same ratios for that. So if everybody is on a 50-50 split and everybody has a 5x on target quota to OTE ratio, then the OTE doesn't really matter. If all of that was gibberish to you, it'll make a little bit more sense here in a second. With that said, I do have some stats here. This comes from the wonderful folks over at Bets Recruiting. This includes a link down there. They have their compensation guide. It really depends on location. It depends on experience level, but it ranges from 100 to a million, just depending upon experience, location, etc. And then we talk a little bit about pay mix. So pay mix, 50-50 is the standard when you are an account executive. The closer you are to the actual dollars coming in, the higher percentage of your on-target earnings will be dedicated to variable. What I mean by that is, as you get a little bit further away, the sales manager, maybe only 40% of their on-target earnings is dedicated to variable. As you get into the VP of sales, it may be even further. SDRs even further, and then into the sales engineer, they may only be on an 80-20 split. Now, these are just the most common that we see. So you can see this is, again, some first-party data that we have for what percent of an AE's on-target earnings is their base salary. Number one, most common, the mean, median, and mode is going to be 50-50. 56% of organizations use a 50-50 split. However, there are some that use 60-40, some that use 40-60. There are some that are on a 0% base salary, completely commission-based plan, and very few that are on a no commission.
Yeah, so that's a great slide. If you're not looking at your screen right now, come check it out, because the data, pretty clear, right, Graham? The data proves out kind of that 50-50 split for your AE role.
Yep.
The way to think about this too is like, it's a question of scope of control. The AE has the highest scope of control in terms of their take home pay. So the variable outcome, right? They are closing the deal. They are the person navigating, managing the contract, signing, what have you. So we tend to advocate for that person to be more relatively variably comped. That's what the market tends to advocate. Versus an account manager who might be comped on gross revenue retention and expansion, which may be a function of how good the product is, bugginess, new feature releases, like all sorts of stuff that's out of the account manager's control. And so they tend to be a lower percentage of their take home pay be variable versus a sales team member effort.
And just a quick question. I don't want to slow us down, but I've got tons of questions. But VP of Sales CRO. So I get this question a lot, so VP of Sales, so we have like the data says, kind of still 50-50, but more base. What about VP of Sales aligned to also corporate objectives? Should a part of their variable, maybe, they get, what their team is producing, but also if we're hitting revenue targets, EBITDA targets, whatever that may be, those corporate goals, should those be part of a VP of Sales plan?
We love that being part of a plan. Now, the thing to think about is how you operate within like the first team principle of a management team. I like that being part of a plan when the whole management team is variably comped on outcome of the business. So your CTO, your COO all have a variable comp component that is just net new revenue for the business, let's say, that involves expansion plus downgrading churn and new business, what have you. Because you want the goal is to balance the VP of Sales being driving the outcomes from their own team, but also not so blinded by that. They are, doing things for the sales team that aren't beneficial for the business more broadly, for example.
Okay. Appreciate it.
It usually depends on where they sit. Like if they sit within the management team and their first team is the management team, then you want them motivated by overall net revenue performance of the business. But if a VP of Sales, for example, something like sitting below a CRO, for example, maybe the CRO will be peer shared with their peers while the VP will be focused on just sales team.
Perfect.
About RevOps leads and RevOps role, I tend to see RevOps in the kind of 80-20 split. Usually, if you think about scope of control, they're several steps removed from the outcome, the revenue outcome, right? They're setting up the systems that drive the performance of the team. So I typically see them in like an 80-20, 90-10 kind of ranges.
And again, these are just kind of the typical that we see. By all means, we see everything across the board. And so if you don't fit perfectly in here, it's not the end of the world. And then there's finally the for what, which is what are those? No, this isn't for finally. My goodness, we're on the how much. This is the for what. Then we have the how. So this is the for what. So there's no one way to set a quota. Typically, organizations use a bunch of different methods and triangulate it. Ideally, they all are aligned.
Thanks.
So on the how to set a quota, again, we have triangulation of these different methods. I like this slide for a couple of reasons. First of all, it's bright orange, and so it lights everybody's face up orange. So I can tell if you're not looking at my screen now. But no, one of the methods is guessing. Hey, this is what it was at my last company. This is what I feel like we can probably sell. Don't do that. That's not a good way of doing it. I don't like the guessing methodology. Instead, let's try to go about it in an educated manner here. And so one is that quota to OTE ratio that Ryan was talking about earlier. We have a couple of different things, a couple of different metrics here on the right-hand side. But what we're doing is we're taking that on-target earnings. So let's say it's $100,000 and we're multiplying it by some number. And what that does is that provides us a annualized quota, an annualized target. So now I'm not saying everybody should be on an annual quota, but in that example, if you are paying them $100,000, you would multiply that by 5.6 or 6.1. And as Ryan was saying here, those numbers do increase as an organization's revenue increases. This also is the comparing industries here as well is important. SaaS versus services. Services are going to be higher. SaaS is going to be lower on average because on the SaaS side, you have that recurring model. And so you can expect more of a lifetime value versus services are locked in just generally for one. Another is historical performance. So taking that historical performance, what percentage of reps you want to hit quota, what percent of reps you want to hit what percent of quota. This is a little harder for organizations that are fairly new and maybe don't have that historical performance data. So instead, you may want to ask what is possible and take a quick benchmark and look at what has been done in the past.
And Graham, Andrew had a really good question about like the role ACV plays in the quota to OT ratio. Like how do you factor it in? I want to hear your thoughts there, but I can keep mine well.
ACV impacts a lot of different things. It impacts quota frequency as well as that quota to OTE ratio a lot of time. So if you are on a smaller ACV, generally you're going to have a quicker sale, therefore a more frequent quota frequency. And you may also oftentimes see a lower quota to OTE ratio. But I don't have the specific data to back that up. That's just what I've seen empirically. Ryan, I don't know if you've seen the same.
Yeah, I mean, the way that we always talk about quota setting is, I really like Graham's point of what's the shortest period in which someone, I think you have in this slide or two. What's the shortest period in which someone could reasonably close 5 deals? And the thought process there is, hey, if you have one deal, if you're closing one deal a quarter, hard to get a quarterly quota because you're either going to be at X percentage attainment or 0% attainment because you either closed the one deal or you didn't, right? And so that makes your outcomes look super shaky and super variable. And so ACV typically impacts the number of deals you're able to close in the period. And that typically, to Graham's point, impacts your quota setting frequency. And then you can mathematically back from there, okay, if this quota was 500K annually, and if this quota is 500K annually, and my ACV is 20K, well, then I'm closing 25 deals a year versus, so I'm probably aligned with maybe a quarterly quota or something like that. But if my ACV is 100K, then I'm only closing 5, then it's going to be pretty challenging for me to close like beyond quarterly quota versus anything.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So quota frequency is something that we'll talk about here either more in depth here in a second. The other way that I want to talk about quota setting is based on a financial model. Obviously, music to the ears of the audience here. We want to take a look at the financial model, all the planned hires, and that quota. Is it feasible if we have a $10 million plan and each rep has $1 million quota? Well, we're going to have to hire if we only have 2 reps right now. And so is it possible to increase those quotas or increase that hiring? And so you need to make sure that you triangulate those as well.
But this was the major trap of 2022, late 2022 and early 2023, which was you fix 80% attainment. And then you're basically like, okay, well, if we have to grow our new business number from 3 million to 6 million next year, we'll just double the rep and they'll just all hit 80% attainment. And then we'll kind of operate from there. And so that is definitely a trap that we saw when people were over hiring. And the thing that you're not factoring into that model is really you really not factoring into that model is the base salaries you have to pay. Do you really want to operate with the leanest team possible and raise quotas in that from a financial leanness perspective so that you can, drive the same amount of growth you're looking for while not just assuming that the team is going to be at 80%? Because that's the trap you fall into when you think about bloating teams the way they are naturally. And you really want to think of demand and driver demand. Do you have enough demand to support that doubling of your new business? And if not, how are you going to get that level of demand for it?
Awesome. I'll talk a little bit about the quota frequency. Yep. As stated, generally recommend a quota frequency that meets 2 requirements: your shortest quota frequency that allows you to close at least 5 deals during that period. And then this is where we talked a little bit about the ASP and sales cycle and how they determine quota frequency as well. So the smaller the ASP, the more frequently you generally have a quota. So if you're sub 10K, most often it's monthly, but we also have again, this comes from our study where we had 450 finance reps and sales leaders. 91% of those organizations failed to hit their sales quotas. 2 of the major reasons that we can help fix here are misaligned sales activities and unrealistic quotas and sales. So finally, the how. There are a bunch of different ways that you can build compensation plans. There are single rate commission plans, which are going to be just a single commission rate. The simplest plan, which is pay 10% on all your earnings. These are good, but can come with their own set of issues. You can't compensate for overperformance or underperformance. You can't compensate for different different product line, things like that. One of my favorite plans, though, honestly. I love a single rate commission. Then there's accelerators. So an accelerator meaning, and there are two types of accelerators as well, meaning once you hit a certain level, you earn more commission rate on that. So those can either be retroactive or non-retroactive, meaning I earn 10% until I hit my quota, and then I earn 20% of anything I sell over that quota. Or I earn 10% until I hit my target, and then I earn 15% of everything that I've sold, including from 0 to 100% on the quarter. There are also decelerators, which is similar to an accelerator, but you earn a lower rate until you hit a certain level, and then you earn your base rate, and then perhaps a higher rate. I always recommend pairing an accelerator with a decelerator as well.
Yeah, this is what we're seeing more and more, to the question of what happened. And this is something we're seeing a lot when teams are too large, is, hey, what happens if a rep ends the period on quarterly quota and ends at 20%? Well, one, you're probably not staying with that rep long term because they're taking demand for your business and not closing at the rate you would look to see. But two, you're not going to want to pay them a full commission rate for being so far on quota. So in a lot of conversations I'm having with teams, it's okay, maybe you have 3 rates, 0 to 33% attainment for the quota quarter, or 0 to 50, or whatever your marker rate that a team member dramatically underperformed expectation for the role. You have a decelerated rate. Then let's say it's 0 to 33%, 34 to 100, you have their base rate. And oftentimes you can make that base rate retroactive so that once they get to 35%, they're earning their full rate on all 35%. And then once they're above 100%, okay, they've unlocked accelerators. So the whole thing here is to give to get. You tell your reps, hey, you get above quota, I'm going to pay you a much higher rate. But if you end the quarter dramatically below expected attainment for a member of the team, you're probably on a performance plan, and I'm also not going to pay you the full commission rate because you didn't do the job as we expected you to do.
Yeah, and that's where an easier way for you to right size that sales to earnings ratio for those underperformers is by including those decelerators. Now, these come with a few words caution as well. Again, pairing that with an accelerator, if there's a reason why, there's a disadvantage for me underperforming, there needs to be an advantage for me to overperform. And then also setting that decelerator bar too high. I have seen it as high as 100%. If I'm achieving 90%, I'm doing a pretty good job at what I'm doing. And so I should earn a pretty good rate.
And the one that I hear from finance teams more and more, or the question is about cliff, which is 0% for a certain rate. We're not a huge cliff fan. And really the reason why is because, let's say I'm a rep on your team and I am below my 33% cliff, but I have this big deal, but it's not going to get me above that cliff. I'm going to be motivated to not close the deal, right? So if I'm at 10% attainment and I have a deal that I can close that would get me to 30% attainment, but my cliff is at 40%, I have zero motivation to close the deal. And I'm going to intentionally stand back and push it for next quarter when it could be making me some money. So you don't ever want to motivate somebody to not close a deal for your business. You always want to motivate them to close. And so you give them like half rate or a 3/4 rate at that of their total rate, so that they know that it's still not great, but the risk of them pushing that deal over into the next quarter is markedly worse financially for them than just closing it now, just because we all know that a deal pushing into the next quarter is a natural ender of the deal overall.
And we've got some great questions coming in, and I'm not sure how many slides, but if you guys balance kind of slides left and questions, but there's a question, right? How common are decelerators in SaaS companies?
They're definitely getting more and more common. I think that teams are realizing that, look, the truth is that these are operating as smaller sales teams. And so a spot on your sales team is a more coveted thing. And in, the Zerk model before, you could just hire 200 reps, and if some worked, some didn't, and you kind of shook out in the wash. But if you're a much smaller sales team, every seat is a coveted spot. And so you're not going to pay that person their full commission rate if they don't achieve some level of reasonable output for expectation. Now, I agree with Graham. It shouldn't be 100%. It shouldn't be 75%. It should be something where if they end the period at that percent attainment, you're concerned for their future with your organization. There were some questions around like gap revenue and booking. People do both. Bookings is the easiest and most interpretable. The rep knows that when she closes the deal, here's the percentage I'm going to earn on that deal. And she knows the dollars that are tied to that. So I tend to like bookings because it's much more interpretable for the rep than, your reps don't understand gap revenue. So
And the other thing is that, and this is where my lack of finance expertise should have paid more attention to finance course may shine through, but my understanding related to gap revenue is that it is spread or amortized over the course of the contract value or contract duration. And what you can end up with there is a situation where a rep isn't being paid for the work that they're doing. They're being paid for the work that they have done in months prior. So 6, 9, 12 months ago, I might have closed a deal and I'm continuing to get paid on that. And that is an issue for motivation standpoint and also for ramping. It takes a while, somebody a long time to get ramped up, and even also for motivation on the other side of like, well, I already closed my deals this year. Why would I bother closing anymore? I can just work from the golf course and continue to get paid on deals I closed 6 months ago.
And then Anthony, a really good question on OT ratio for a VP of sales, like that takes commissions for anything sales team sells. And so what I would point you to, Anthony, is the concept of what I call like a commission stack and the percentage commissions you're paying across every member of the team, which is something that I don't think people think about enough, is basically on one deal, who are all the people who can earn commissions on that one deal? And what is the percentage commission rate you're comfortable paying for your business across, cut by the deal level, not cut by the person level. So we typically advise sub 30% across your sales leader. The challenge is maybe you have a BDR manager, an AE, director, a VP, and a CRO, all earning commissions on the same deal. And what you're going to want to do is pivot your data on the deal ID and help the person and see, okay, this is a 10K deal. All of a sudden you blink, I'm paying 4K in commissions or 5K in commissions across all 8 people who helped close that deal, right? And so we typically advise you allocate that in the way that you want. You want the seller to be the person who earns the highest commission rate, then probably the BDR, then probably the BDR manager, or then probably the sales manager, or the BDR manager, then you move up that you earn less and less of a rate. But that's the thing, is you want to build what your tolerable commission stack is. And from there, you can say, okay, how am I allocating these 30 points that I have across the 7 people who touch a deal, for example? I don't know, Graham, there's anything else.
Oh, no, I think that's a great way of thinking about it. There is one of the hardest questions to answer in a short period of time, which is around consumption-based or usage-based. I am actually speaking on a different webinar about that next month. Happy to share that with you. I have a full hour-long conversation about how to compensate on consumption-based, and we probably won't even cover all of it. It's exceedingly difficult, but I mean, the two in 60 seconds, the two easiest ways are to pay on estimated and pay on actuals, and they each have their pros and cons. And then there's a bunch of gray space in between the two. So you're going to be paying based on triggers, or based on estimates, or based on, you're partially based on billing, partially based on estimate. There's 100 different ways to pay on.
Yeah, and if you want to share that link later, that I could see that definitely could take up an hour. So yeah, if you want to share that, I'm sure people would join that as well.
What you'll basically see is we work with a lot of like credit card and financing companies and data warehouse storage companies who all have this like very variable revenue received, consumption-based revenue received. The short of it is, how much have you guaranteed you're going to receive upon contract signature? Or what's your rate of guarantee in your mind? Like if they sign an expected 100K contract, and how likely do you end below 50K for the contract? Like maybe that's never. Maybe like, what's your margin of error on initial contract billing and then what you expect to receive? Pay the rep on whatever has the lowest margin of error. And then from there, you can drip out, their payments and installments in the way that Graham's saying.
You can cover it up. You can do all kinds of different things.
If you just solely drip out, the problem is it just doesn't really become very motivational for your seller, because they're just getting these like paper cut small check on top of all these things over time. And it's not motivating the way you want it to be.
And we've got a ton of great questions coming in here. So I don't know if there are some
Yeah, I
slides you
mean,
still
as
want to
far as
hit here
slides,
or
no worries. We
yeah.
can fire through the next couple of slides.
Okay.
I think this might be the final slide actually, which
Okay.
is multi-year terms as well. So if you're a SaaS company selling 1 year, 2 year, and 3 year deals, a lot of times they all go towards the same quota, but your earnings rule is slightly different for each of those. They're not going to be double for a 2 year deal, but it is slightly more. And again, you're paying on the ARR, you're not paying on the total contract value for that.
Kind of ties into a little bit to Ben's question from before, which I wanted to make sure we covered, was like, how do you best link sales comp to customer profitability and like LTV CAC and that sort of thing? The way that I tend to think about this is really in the context of how do you know when a contract is signed if they're going to be a great customer for you? And if you know that they're going to be a great customer for you with some more coverage requirements, okay, pay your reps a higher commission rate for that great customer. So the way that we think about it here, great customer, the longer term contract, right? I know I don't have to renew you. I have longer time to implement you. So I'm going to pay, to Graham's point, you a higher commission rate for a 3-year deal versus a 1-year deal because you've made more of an investment in the product and you're more invested in getting it right because you're in a longer term arrangement. The other thing about that could be an ideal customer profile where you say, hey, I know the characteristics of a great customer. I have those markers in my CRM that when a rep closes an ICP customer, I'm going to pay them a higher commission rate than if they close a non-ICP customer because I know that the LTV to CAC for my ICP customers, because they have low churn and high expansion, what have you, is markedly better. So my big prompt is if you have a churn issue or you're worried about LTV to CAC in the function of comp plans, find your great customer. What are the demographic components of your great customers that you know? And then tie that to an accelerator on the comp plan across your entire team. So maybe your marketing team gets extra dollars per demo and pipeline for ICP. Your BDRs get extra dollars per demo. Your reps get extra dollars for closing ICP, and your AMs get extra dollars for renewing ICP. And then all of a sudden, you have more and more ICP customers because you've rewarded everybody at every stage of the value chain for closing those type of customers.
And quick clarification on that multi-year slide. So you had year 3, 15% commission. Is that 15% on year 1? Is that what you're saying there?
Then you like a comp plan where the annual recurring revenue is the thing that you're calculating the commission rate off of. I think it's more interpretable for reps, especially as they're comparing a 1-year versus 2-year versus a 3-year contract. So the way that I think about it is, okay, I'm going to pay you a higher commission rate on the year 1, on the annual recurring revenue, just on the year 1 ARR if you sign a 3-year contract versus if you sign a 1.
Yeah, I mean, where it can get confusing though is if there are baked in customer or contract increases year over. And then in that case, if they're gradual or small contract increases, then you may still just go with the 1 year. If they are drastic, you may go with a blended rate or to Ryan's point, I guess ARR being total contract value divided by total term length.
I mean, it's a great scope of control question, right? 9 times out of 10, a new business rep is signing a 3-year deal. They're signing the contract. They attend the first kickoff call. That happens within the first 50 days. And then they are no longer thinking about that customer ever again, right? So like, why would you pay them commission rate for year 2 and year 3 when they have no control? At that point, I would be out with that customer. And so that would be the reason why I would just do it based off of like the year 1 and year curve.
And I saw a lot of questions here. Feel free to keep posting. Services commission. So we sell our ARR plus we have implementation. Let's say we sell 250,000 ARR, 50,000 of services. What are we comping on the services?
Yeah, I was just typing up an answer to that.
Oh, you were? Okay.
Yeah, no worries. So
Yeah.
generally, the companies differentiate between recurring and non-recurring revenue if you have those. And so those implementation fees are generally paid at a lower rate and maybe don't go towards the same quota. They may have a separate target or separate quota, but they generally are paid at a much smaller rate because A lot of times those also involve people and people hours. And when they involve people hours, those are more expensive dollars. And so we pay a much lower commission rate on those. You may pay 10% on your SaaS revenue and 2% on your implementation revenue. If you pay 0%, that's the first thing to get discounted and the first thing to get removed.
And do you think, I mean, what's a ballpark? Is it 2% on services? I've paid 5% before. Maybe those too rich. Is there kind of a range for services commissions, that non-recurring?
I think a lot of it depends on what you're paying for the non-services component. You know, it tends to be a multiple of that between 20 and 50% of the recurring.
Recurring. Okay. 20 to 50. Oh, that's a good kind of rule of thumb of the recurring.
So if you're paying 15% on the recurring, then you'd be paying between 3 and 7.5% on the non.
Okay, perfect. Thanks.
No, pretty good question on deal source. Yeah, we see that a lot. And it's really a question of scope. The same thing, it's scope of control, right? So like, how much work did the seller do to drive that traffic? I actually tend to like it more to pay an accelerator on self-generated outbound pipeline versus like a decelerator off of SDR sourced or something. Because if you think about it from the team member's perspective, if their job is just to take SDR warm handoff leads and run them, then they haven't done anything wrong. So like decelerators are, to me, when somebody's done something that's like not advantageous for the business, the way that I think about it is, okay, if they're doing something great, I'm going to accelerate their rate. So if they're self-sourcing a ton of their own pipeline, I can pay them an accelerated commission rate off of that self-sourced pipeline versus the regular commission rate off of handed.
Yeah, we've got a lot of questions rolling in here, guys. And yeah, if you guys want to pick some out here.
I was trying to respond to another one. Ryan and I slightly disagree about that one. I think that, marketing sourced opportunities tend to be the highest closing, the fastest closing, and also the ones that you've already spent the most on. And so I think that paying a lower rate, you're indicating to the reps that those are a less valuable opportunity to you. And so paying a different rate on marketing sourced versus outbound sourced sends the wrong message. But I understand that, there may be situations where you need to motivate your reps to do more outbound. And in that instance, I would try to do more of a short term, like a spec based on that, as opposed to a permanent part of your plan. Separate.
Yeah. And Kelly put the link, we're getting tons of questions here. We will never answer them in the time allotted, which is usually the case. So book time with Ryan after this, if you have more sales comp plans. But Graham, Ryan, if you want to maybe take one more here and then we'll wrap up.
What is that? There's a great question around charging per active seats. You tell me which one you want to.
Yeah, I mean, the one just quickly that I think hear from Sean, have you seen comp plans designed to incentivize reps to not discount? I don't like that as a factor of the compensation plan. I like that as a set of rules that the sales rep has to follow. So the rep can discount up to 5% and managers up to 10 and directors up to 12, as opposed to baking it in. It tends to add just another whole other layer of complexity.
Yeah, and if they're discounting, they've already lowered the ARR. They're going to multiply the commission rate off of end ways, and so the rep knows that too. So double penalizing them for it feels punitive. And I think the thing to think about too is you want a comp plan. It's a really good point. You want a comp plan to be something that motivates people to do something great for your business, but not their sole. Like, you're not going to pay them a comp plan for showing up to work, for like taking demos, for being in meetings. Like, you want to limit the point at which you're trying to overguide their like daily action of being a like reasonable member of your team and following the rules.
Perfect. And Sophie posted that question again, and looks like Graham has a follow-up because I don't know what spill off is, but yeah, Sophie, if you want to clarify on that one, we can try to bundle that in with one last question here before we wrap up. So, but yeah, as we wrap up here, really appreciate your time today. There's a ton of content here, a ton of information. We'll have the slides, the replay go out either later today or in the morning, because probably need to review a lot of this stuff. At least I do, because there are a lot of good nuggets in there. So hope you found a ton of value here. Here are their emails as well. Shoot them an email if you have any questions about your sales comp design. And again, Ryan and Graham are donating their time today to help the SaaS community. So big thanks to Ryan and Graham. So show your appreciation in the comments. And, again, really, hey, Marty, I really appreciate that. Sean, a lot of familiar faces out there. So yeah, really appreciate it. The calendar link is out there. Here are their emails to follow up. And then Sophie, yeah, maybe you can book time or email the Ryan and Graham directly on your question to get that taken care of. So Ryan, Graham, appreciate your time today. That